Welcome, everybody. It is Monday, February 11th, 2019. I'd like to welcome you all to the regular meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners for the Wilmette Park District. First item on our agenda this evening is our roll call.
Commissioner Abbott?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Foster?
Here.
Commissioner Pelleton?
Here.
Commissioner O'Vanney?
Here.
Commissioner Shelley?
Here.
Commissioner Wolf?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next up on our agenda is the approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes for the November 19, 2018 Committee of the Whole meeting.
I'll second that.
Just to remind everyone, these were minutes that we discussed at our last board meeting, but due to some multiple changes, and then we decided to have that changed, put back in, and then relook at them and approve them tonight. Are there any comments or corrections to this latest round?
No.
Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Pelleton?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Vanney?
Yes.
Commissioner Shelley?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to approve the minutes for the December 10th, 2018 closed session meeting.
Second.
Are there any
Thank you.
comments?
I was a little worried.
I know, I was like, oh. Are there any comments or corrections to the December 10th, 2018 closed session meeting minutes?
I have some which we will not discuss here.
Okay, so we'll discuss that in closed session, and then we'll have to vote on those at our next meeting or when we come back out?
When we come back
out. Okay.
Convene.
When we reconvene. Okay. Moving on.
I move to approve the minutes of the January 14, 2019 public hearing and regular meeting.
I'll second that.
Are there any comments or corrections to the January 14th public hearing and regular meeting minutes? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Pelleton?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Vanney?
Yes.
Commissioner Shelley?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is communications and correspondence. I don't believe there were any in the packet. Are there any commissioners that have any communications or correspondence they'd like to bring forth? No. All right, moving along. Recognition of visitors. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to address us? All right, no one wants to talk. Thanks very much. Next up, approval of the voucher list.
Okay. I move to approve the voucher list in the amount of $1,506,550.99, a copy of which is to be attached to and become a permanent part of the minutes of this meeting.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions regarding the voucher list?
I had one request, which was for Jerry and or Steve Holloway to talk about kind of how we're dealing with the contractor and subcontractor payments and releases and kind of what that process is so we can get it into the minutes.
I'll take care of it, Jerry. The prior committees asked if the staff was collecting all the proper waivers prior to approving payments of invoices. That is happening. The architects of Woodhouse Tanucci are acting as a second set of eyes for us, and all along we've been collecting those waivers and getting their double check of the work that has been billed for prior to our approving and cutting checks.
Great.
And Olson's collecting insurance certificates and keeping track of those?
Yes.
Okay.
And is the waiver for the prior payment or the waiver for the current payment?
The current payment.
Okay, good.
So one of the reasons that I'm sure Brian is asking about insurance is generally the insurance renews the calendar year, so they have to get new insurance certificates.
For this calendar year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I had a couple questions, or one question actually. I noticed quite a few duplicate charges on here, and I noticed they were billed and then credited back. A lot of them it says 2018 duplicate charges. Just wondering why there were so many this month.
Mr. Holloway has an answer for that.
Sorry.
He's jumping out of his seat.
Sorry.
He knew I didn't know.
Yeah, you had that dazed look.
There was some type of error at JP Morgan Chase, so some of our card members had it where they were charged erroneously,
Okay.
and JP Morgan Chase reversed the charges on their account.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Pelleton?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Vanney?
Yes.
Commissioner Shelley?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Voucher list is approved.
Next on our agenda is the Executive Director's Report.
Thank you. As we all know, on January 30th, it got real cold. And because of that, we shut down all programs and facilities and operations for that day to make sure not only our staff, but all of our patrons stayed in, stayed safe, and stayed warm. We reopened on Thursday the 31st at 10 a.m. As we discussed in some of the committee meetings tonight, we did not receive any sort of complaints or pushbacks from the public, so I think everyone was on the same page on this one. During the closure, Superintendent Ulrich, as well as a couple of his staff members, Ernie and Jack, were on site most of the day on the 30th, going from building to building to building, checking for broken water pipes and malfunctioning equipment. And we did experience a couple rooftop units over at the Community Recreation Center that weren't working perfectly, as well as one at the Centennial Recreation Complex in Tennis. But they were able to get them all working well enough to keep things warm enough and get things back up and running on Thursday. So thank you to the Parks Department and the Building Services Division for all their work on that day. Another thing that happened as a result of the cold weather is we canceled our camp open house and job fair. Since the camp registration started the following week, which was this past Tuesday, last week, we did away with the camp open house because there just wasn't enough time to reschedule it and have it be productive. But we did reschedule the job fair for February 26th from 6 to 7:30 over at the Community Recreation Center, where interested parties can come, learn about our different jobs, talk to the staff that are doing the hiring, fill out applications, and even be interviewed on site. So a little bit different than we've done in the past, improvement every year, and hopefully that'll help us snag some of the more interested parties up front. Speaking of camp registration began 9 a.m. February 5th for residents. At the time of the report, we had 3,867 enrollments, of which about 89% were processed online. Right before the meeting, I ran the report again. We're now slightly over 4,000 enrollments, still right around 88% coming in online. And resident or non-resident registration begins tomorrow at 9 a.m., February 12th. Registration numbers are looking very solid across the board. Looking forward to your agenda, you do have an item under new business. You might recall a handful of months ago we approved some agreements for Verizon to do cellular equipment over at our cellular site on the chimney at Malincrot. This is just another agreement to allow them site access to do their due diligence. This agreement has been thoroughly vetted, reviewed, and batted back and forth between Verizon's legal and our legal department, and our attorney is recommending it for approval. And then the only other item I have is a stormwater update, but I will wait to speak on that when we get to that agenda item.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wilson? Thank you very much. We'll move along to committee reports. First up, we have the Lakefront Committee.
As much as I would like to have a lengthy report on our activities, the Lakefront Committee didn't meet this month. That's the first time.
In years.
So I don't have a report.
Sadly. But construction is moving along.
It is. Unbelievably, even in this cold, they're still out there plugging away.
Good to hear. All right. Thank you. Facilities and Operations Committee.
Okay. I will give the facilities report. We met earlier tonight. Excuse me. And we got reports about tennis. On the tennis front, we had the new reservations for new court times. That went extremely well. This year, we have 360 court times taken versus 273 last year. According to Jason, most of that is juniors, and that would be like U18 type of juniors. Speaking of that, camp registrations are going along better than, a little bit better pace than previous years. The traditional camp is, a lot of people know, Pirate Tennis Camp. That is on schedule. He's also introduced three other junior camps. One of them this year is a new one, which is younger than 10 years old, high performance, younger than 10 years old type of camp. So he's trying to increase the amount of junior participation at an earlier age, and this U10 is a good example of that. Moving on to paddle, he reported on paddle. Season's going along as you might expect, the height of the season. They are getting bids early in order to resurface the courts, and that will come out sometime in the near future. The other last thing he reported on was there's a industry conference that happens in Orlando every year by the PGA, which is the Golf Association, and then also what's called the TOM, or TOM, which I didn't know the term, but that's the tennis version of the same conference. He went down to that primarily to learn about what different organizations are doing with the sport of pickleball. His comment was that it's growing in popularity. In fact, it's quote-unquote not going away. It is growing in popularity. We currently, if you're not aware, have 2 courts outdoors and a couple of courts apparently indoors at the CRC. And keeping up with the demand overall is the issue there, finding court space and the like. Moving over to ice and pool. On the ice side, on January 19th, we had the solo tryouts, or auditions, I guess is the correct word, auditions for solos. All 47 people that auditioned did get a part as a soloist in the upcoming ice show. Overall, our figure skating lessons are very well received right now, better than in previous years. And there's going to be more activity there at the ice rink, especially over the next few weekends, because the organization that I believe is called the Northern Illinois Hockey League is having their championship weekend there for U12 on the 16th and 17th and the 23rd and 24th. So there'll be a lot of activity at the ice rink. Moving over to the pool facility, we had a reasonable discussion regarding hiring of pool staff, how that's going. Apparently, given the tight labor market, it is going as well as we can expect. We are going to open up early bird registrations on the 14th, which is later this week. And then in addition to the early bird reservations this year, they're going to be offering what's they're referring to as the preseason pass, which will be offered from May 1st all the way through to the end of the year. And the big news out of the pool this year is that we're going to open for the entire month of September. They're referring to it as Sizzling September. And Sizzling September is going to be basically hours in the morning and on the weekend, and the pass will be very inexpensive. I believe he said $32 for the entire month. You will have to buy a separate pass for the month of September because your other pass will expire on Labor Day. But that is a big news, I think, especially for the lap swimmers that are always looking for opportunities to swim outside. And if we get hot days in September, that will be good as well. And that would be my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the Facilities Committee?
Just a clarification, the pickleball courts are actually tennis courts with the lines either painted on them or taped on them, so if people were getting excited about having their regular pickleball court.
But where are they at the CRC?
So there's a combination. Outdoors, we have the lines down on the tennis courts,
On
but
the CRC,
indoors,
yeah.
we have taped out on the gym floor, 2 courts, so you can do indoor pickleball. We have a couple classes that people do pickleball through indoors in the winter.
Got it. Thank you for that.
No, that Steve expects me to say something about the swimming, because this was a particular crusade of mine. Before I was on the board, actually, I was harassing the pool staff about why it is that we close so early in the season. So I am, yes, thrilled, and I know that there will be a lot of positive feedback from a lot of people I know who like to swim. I would say, Shelley, likewise.
Yep.
So it's
Great.
a wonderful and a surprising innovation.
Great.
It's fantastic.
All right, moving along to Parks and Recreation Committee.
Parks and Rec met tonight as well. I know that Steve mentioned it. We did have to shut down one day and part of a day, particularly the CRC, but I just want to extend my thanks and the board's thanks to the staff. These buildings are designed for -10, not -22. And so I think it's testament to Jerry and the work of several generations of maintenance and keeping these buildings up that they weathered this extreme weather event so well without a lot of freeze-ups or shutdowns. So there were some, but they got on it right away, and the facilities are back and running. So thank you to the staff. Job well done. Gymnastics is mostly out at tournaments these days. Fitness is lose to win is, I think, in 4 weeks, at least 4 weeks, maybe in their 5th week. Somebody ran our track. Somebody ran like 2.5 miles on our track in 20 minutes, and they lose to win. I think that's look, I can't do that. Camp registrations, as Steve said, they're open. Non-residents start tomorrow, so residents, get on the computer, and if you're looking for camp registrations and you want to do it more easily, afraid about getting frozen out, get them in tonight. There was a camp fair that was rescheduled because of the weather. It's now February 26th from 6 to 7:30. It'll be at the CRC. The daddy-daughter dance coming up, right? And it is, we have 154 couples, and that always makes me smile. Frog and Toad, which are the first to 4th graders, just wrapped up its productions, and there were auditions for Annie for the 5th through 8th graders. We had 80 audition. Unfortunately, 55 spots, but that's a good turnout. Otherwise, we received updates on Langdon Park. Really nothing much to report. The park is open, and the play area is open, and sometime in the spring there'll be a short shutdown, perhaps a week duration, to put down the rubber surface when the weather gets warmer. We had discussions about K Park as well. We're still discussing K Park. That's Jerry has come up with a much cheaper and I believe better solution to fixing the pond. I mean, vastly cheaper, and we're still refining costs and scope for the rest of the park. That's all I have for Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Any questions for Parks and Recreation?
I wanted to make a comment that the camp fair you're referring to is the camp job fair. That was rescheduled, not the camp open house.
It's just a job fair.
Yes.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't. Okay.
Thank you. Next up, golf operations.
Golf did not meet this month,
Okay. Thank you.
or didn't meet and will not meet this month. We will meet again in March.
Still snow covered.
Yeah, well, yes.
But you've been open for cross-country skiing,
Cross-country.
Which received a lot of positive comments.
Yeah, and so people are aware, I have been asked this, the restaurant is open during the winter, right? So if you cross-country ski, you can eat afterwards.
Great.
And I have some feedback from some cross-country skiers who said that if we can figure out a donation box solution, that they're convinced that people would be more than happy to make a contribution. So if we had a mail slot or something in the building.
A restaurant.
Yeah.
A donation for the course?
As cross-country skiers, there's no charge to
right,
come
to
and
it.
use the facility.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
many places would charge.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's a nice service.
Thank you. And finally, Financial Planning and Policy Committee.
Okay, we did not meet in December. That's why there was no report in January, plus I wasn't here. And we did meet in January, and we had 2 subjects. One was an easy one. We got an update on the audit from Steve Holloway. Things are going well as of that meeting. I haven't heard any different. We'll hear more, obviously, at the end of the month when we have our meeting on the fourth Monday. The other thing we talked about, and the agenda is a little bit of a misnomer. It says compensation study. It's really a lot more than that. But we had the person who's kind of the lead person for GovHR, who's doing who's the consultant who's doing the work, getting all the information on salary grades and comparable positions and looking at how things relate to each other, both internally and externally. And then also they'll be coming back to us with recommendations on how to administer what we got going forward. So we had talked with Steve earlier about making sure the committee had input to GovHR before they really started getting into things. Just they knew where this came from and what our concerns were, and so they were there, or she was there to kind of take that up. So that's what the two major items were.
Any questions for the Financial Planning and Policy Committee? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to unfinished business. Under unfinished business, we have our stormwater update. And before I turn it over to Steve, I just wanted to let you all know that I reached out to Bob Belinsky, and I think I let you all know this. He and I met to kind of talk about making sure we're all on the same page. He reassured me they're very, comfortable with the fact that we need to take our time to do our due diligence, have the discussions amongst ourselves, make sure that we're all comfortable with what is moving forward. And he reiterated again that they don't ever want to do anything that would destroy the parks or that would have a long-term environmental impact or anything in these parks, and they're doing their work alongside ours to make sure that everything gets put back the same or if not better than what it is now, and that we have a great plan in place to alleviate a lot of stormwater in a lot of our residents' homes. In addition to that, I also reached out to Mark Steen, who is the president of the school board, just to touch base with him. I sent him an email making sure that they're kind of aware of everything that's going on, given that this tank will be in the Centennial Playfields behind, community playfields behind Highcrest. I haven't heard back from him, but I will update you all when and if I get any information back from him. So now I will turn it over to our Director Wilson.
Okay, thank you. In my report, you can read along with me. I'm just going to kind of go line by line. Monday, February 4th, the Village Board held a special board meeting on stormwater. I attended it. 3 board members from our board were also there. At the meeting, the engineers from Christopher Burke gave a presentation, 2-part presentation. First part being on the discussion that was held here in November of Centennial Park versus community playfields, passing along the same information that was disseminated here, as well as the board's consensus to move the focus to community playfields. The village did their own consensus straw poll and came to the same unanimous decision, so all eyes are on community playfields and no longer on Centennial. The second part of their presentation was where they discussed the optimization of the tanks. So there was a base plan, and then that covered X percent of structures in town, and then is there a way to make the tanks or add relief sewers to cover more structures and get closer to 100% coverage in a 10-year event, and then what would be the related costs. They made that presentation to the village board. The slides that they showed the village board were actually the same slides that they showed here, where you could see 2 outlines of the tanks in the parks showing what the base is and what an optimized size would be. So it's exactly what we saw at our meeting. The village board discussed it and once again did a straw poll and agreed that they wanted to pursue the optimized plan. I think to be even more specific, there's 2 components to the optimization. One is larger vaults underneath the parks, and then there's additional relief sewers. And so they approached it as future-proofing the plan, and they really were focused on the vault sizes underneath the parks because they don't want to have to try and change those sizes once they're underground, but they can choose to add relief sewers somewhere down the road as budgets or need is more closely vetted. So that was really where they came to a conclusion at their meeting. With all of that information kind of getting worked out and having a clearer plan, President Wolf and I spoke about how this board would structure its meeting schedule to gather input. You can see in the packet in my report, meetings starting with public hearings at the March, April, and May board meeting. So right before these board meetings start, where we're all going to be here, we'll hold a public hearing before we begin the board meeting. Those will be on community playfields, Hibbard Park, and Thornwood Park, the order in which the work is to be completed by the village. In between those public hearings, public input sessions will be scheduled and held by staff where people can come and talk about the project itself and what they want to see in the parks when it's all said and done, put back together. Depending on weather, we'd like to be out in the parks like we do our playgrounds. So you can see that I have, when on April 3rd, when we're going to talk community playfields, I have community playfields or Mallinckrodt. It's really going to be weather dependent on where we hold it. Similarly for Hibbert Park, either in Hibbert Park or Community Recreation Center, which is in Hibbert Park, and then Thornwood Park, in Thornwood Park, or at Mallinckrodt again. So looking for the closest nearby facility if we can't be in the parks. Once again, these meetings are all items we're going to broadcast through the board brief emails, our monthly newsletter, mass emails to residents. The village has offered to put it in their e-newsletters. We'll put it on our website and through social media, and any other ideas anyone has, because we definitely want to get public participation. And that is my report.
And just to clarify, if anyone can attend these meetings and has any input that they would like to give, it can be directed to Director Wilson, and he will be compiling all kind of public input on each of these parks. So
Correct.
If anyone...
In every email we send out, my email
Yes.
address is going to be in there. People
Yep.
can click on it and just send us a link, quick, so they don't have to plan out a night around our meeting. They can
Right.
provide feedback seamlessly through the emails. And then the only other thing I forgot to mention is, once all these meetings are done and this board feels that it has come to its conclusions about all the aspects it needs to consider, that's when we'll begin work on an intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Wilmette as to outline all the legal responsibilities and obligations for completing the work and ongoing maintenance and liability and all those good details. And based on the meeting that I went to on the 4th, the only work they're planning on doing related to stormwater in the year 2019 is the sewer work underneath Locust Road, which is set for construction between March and November of this year. And then the earliest that they would be looking at doing work on a park is in the summer of 2020, because they're looking at community playfields. And the initial thought process on timing of that is to try and put it into the summer as much as possible to have as little impact on the school year. But even those details still need to be vetted by this board, and we all need to come to a consensus on even the scheduling of the work.
When we get to the point of having an intergovernmental agreement, will it be 3 separate ones on each park, or will it be one for all 3 parks?
It can be either way.
Okay.
In initial conversations with village staff, including their attorney, since the entire system is dependent on all 3 sites being in use together in conjunction, they're not going to want to sign a single park agreement until they have some assurances on the other 2 parks. Likewise, we're not going to want to, sign an agreement that gives assurances until we know for sure what we want to do. So I think it's probably setting itself up for a single agreement once we've done our full vetting process.
Okay.
And another topic that got brought up before was having some kind of environmental impact study done, and if President Belinsky was talking about his concern about long-term environmental impact, how are we going to determine what the long-term environmental impact is? And is there a study that's already been budgeted for?
So we haven't budgeted for an impact study. My understanding of this system is that it is the same as every single sewer pipe that's in our town already. It's made of concrete and doesn't take any chemicals or anything like that. So it's like what's already in the ground. And so I'm sure there's probably studies of what that does that we can reference, because it's all the same materials. If there's something more that this board would like to see, we need to make that request of the village.
I think if President Belinsky said that he's concerned about making sure that the long-term environmental impact on the parks are not hindered or impacted at all, I think we should absolutely ask him to do it. That's one of the conditions.
I think that's a slight mischaracterization of what he said.
Agreed.
And he was very, what was said during the meeting was that, and this was by the engineer, if I remember correctly, that there are environmental not hurdles to overcome, but it has to be approved by Illinois EPA and some other organization, I can't remember who, but there were two distinct organizations that were concerned with the environmental aspect of it. And they'll have to get permits for that before they start doing any work. So I don't know if that answers your concerns or not, addresses your concerns or not, but there are certainly environmental safeguards for this kind of work.
And I don't know if you're referencing, so I was just going to say, I don't know if you're referencing my conversation
I was
with him.
referencing your, that's
exactly,
I mean, that's almost exactly the quote.
Yeah, so his phrasing was that they are looking at the environmental aspects of this project with their engineers as they're going through it. I don't believe they had a separate plan to do any kind of separate environmental study, but to Ryrie's point, their engineers are getting permits through all these different organizations to make sure that there's no long-term impact. They have no desire to wreck any of the parks or anything in the village.
I know they don't, but I mean,
you don't want to do it inadvertently either.
People that put asbestos in buildings 50 years ago didn't have any intention to do anything either.
Right, but this is just a tank that's holding water. It's not any kind of sewage or anything else that would be...
But there's a tank under the ground, right?
But yes, I mean, again, I think that their engineers are making sure.
Personally, I would feel much more comfortable as a steward of our park to have an environmental impact study done in order for somebody to say exactly what Steve said. You know, with all due respect to Steve, I'm just as the commissioner, I'm like, okay, somebody's saying, oh, it's the same thing as a sewer, right? But nobody in a position of authority is saying it's the same thing as a sewer.
Would you feel more comfortable if their engineers came back with some sort of a statement giving what they think the environmental impact would be?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean,
Could
just
you request that from the village?
something that we can feel comfortable that.
Some assurances that.
Yeah, that we don't. They're putting tanks under the ground, right, in our parks.
Correct.
Right. If I was doing something in my basement, I would imagine that the village would ask me a lot of questions about what I was doing in my basement, right, under the ground. So I think we should be asking the village the exact same thing.
Fair point.
I would also add that they did address the fact that they're communicating with District 39 in the meeting that we attended.
Agreed. I was just trying to close the loop to make sure we're all talking.
No, that's absolutely worthwhile.
You can't over-communicate.
Right.
So great job.
And I am be really intrigued to see their logistics plan for where these trucks and construction equipment are going to be entering and exiting the site.
They acknowledged that the project would last longer than the summer, but not by much, and they haven't figured that out, but they're hoping that they can get it as much done or the most disruptive work done by the summer, but more to come. Right?
I mean, even this year at High Crest, they were doing construction into the beginning of the school year, and they were able to adjust the carpool lines and the entrances and things like that for the kids to have the least impact on the school as possible. But there's still construction going on at the beginning of the school year. So
there'll be a period where a lot of trucks are coming off-site, taking spoil off-site. So
right, but I'm assuming that'd
be early on.
Yeah, early on. Yeah.
Right.
My recollection of the tank that is under the ground already in Glenview at the corner of Lake and Waukegan is under a school also. It's under the parking lot of a school on that corner.
Right.
And the access to that to that school seems pretty tough too. So I don't know how big that project was relative to this project, but when you go there, you have absolutely no idea that it's there.
Lions School?
Huh?
Under Lions School?
In Westcott.
No, it's Lions.
It's Lions.
Oh, it is?
On the
corner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In the south corner.
I wasn't on the board, but when you did West Park, maybe that's why I'm thinking of it, what sort of environmental information did you guys get?
A lot because it was storm sewage.
Oh, because
Yeah, it was sewage. It was sewage
Sanitary
as opposed to
sewer.
water.
Okay.
Was it like an outside agency?
I think so, yeah.
And was that something that the village did, or was that something that the Park District did?
I know we didn't pay for it.
The village did it.
did.
The village
Okay.
did it, yeah.
Yes, several of us were at the meeting, including Steve. There were this optimization, which the goal of the village was to make sure that they addressed as many residents who have been impacted by stormwater as possible. And so, and that was a concern that the village had when they voted for option 3, is like, can we do better? And this was Burke's response. I thought it was a good meeting. For the most part, 2 of the Hibbard and Thornwood, the tanks didn't get much larger, 5-10%. The tank at the community playfield got about 50% larger. Of course, community playfield, you could lose that size tank there, but it is a big increase from around 10 to 12 to about 18 or something acre feet. It doesn't concern me that much. I thought it was a very good presentation, and I thought the village, again, is being very proactive in trying to address as many residents as possible, but it is a bigger tank, that's all.
And I found it interesting that they haven't got anything in the budget yet, not even a placeholder for the improvements to the park. So that's a dollar amount that's not visible yet. And the kind of the extra that they were adding on
$8 million.
was, I think, more than $8 million, I think, in total.
8 point something.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, they basically, looking at the numbers, it's going from 50 million to 60-something
68.
million. Yeah.
Right.
18, yeah.
That's with, so you're thinking of the increased tank
and,
size is 8 million?
Yeah.
The additional relief sewers takes it all the way up to
Yeah.
68 million.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
so-
missed that.
Yeah, so it went from like 50, a little over 50 to 68 million
Oh.
in 20 minutes. So,
There's also no cost in the budgets for their permits. I believe that was the other thing that was missing off of there.
no.
So what they do have built into the budget is restoring the parks as is, nothing additional, because they don't know what the additionals are.
Right, we don't.
Yeah.
Right. So are there,
I thought I read in here that it wasn't in, I thought I read in the deck that it wasn't budgeted for. You're saying it was budgeted for?
They have budgeted for putting back whatever's there right now, grass. And they don't have additional money built in for any sort of
Like
improvements.
turf,
Or,
if we.
or if we
No
put
improvements.
a water fountain, or I
Just
don't know,
no
whatever, you
improvements,
know,
yeah.
whatever little thing.
Maybe a foundation.
So are there any other questions or anything else that we need to be directing Steve to go back to the village staff to be asking, other than the environmental piece that we'd like to see? Are there other pieces of information that'll help you all make decisions regarding this project moving forward?
Well,
Well, I don't want to, I mean, if I'm the only one that's asking for the
Improvements.
environmental study, I mean, I'm only one person, right? I'm not the whole board, right?
I
So-
think
I'm
it's,
comfortable.
I kind of feel like, I could be wrong on this, but I feel like they should have some major hoops to jump through to get, like you said, with our basement, you're right. They would, I mean, you know what it takes to do anything to your house. I would think they would have the same kind of hoops to jump through to do a project like this.
Agreed.
With, I don't know who, some agencies, right? I hope.
yeah, there's a rigorous entitlement process with
Yeah.
regulatory agencies,
I would
and
think.
they're even beholden to their own, entitlement process. When they've done projects, they've had to delay them because they couldn't get on their own zoning agendas. So they hold themselves to their own, procedures and policies as well.
So I'm not, I think it's a perfectly good thing to bring up, John. I do.
I just don't want to push
I
the
just-
agenda
I
on
wasn't
something
sure
that,
if you were
that everybody
asking
else is not as
Budget
interested.
and get our out, and like an outside agency to do it on our behalf, or
Let's-
if we trust their process.
Yeah, let's
That's-
find
yeah.
out what they've
Yeah,
got.
let's
in-
find out what their process
Yeah,
is
yeah.
before we make that
I think
determination.
it's a good idea.
I agree.
Are there any comments or questions regarding the kind of timeline that Steve and I had kind of worked out for the public hearings and the input sessions? Does that seem reasonable to everybody?
I would say that one meeting for each of these is great. Is one meeting going to do it? I don't know.
well,
There's two.
Actually, yeah.
Well, there's this meeting, right?
they
This is
can
the
come
public.
to
They can come
either
to this.
and give their,
Sure.
In addition, they
Input.
can take electronic or written or any other kind of input. This is not to say they have to come to these meetings to give their input.
Sure. Look, I'm not trying to throw a wrench. I'm just saying, we've seen, like, try to add a 6-foot sidewalk in Langdon Park, right? So, is that enough time? Hopefully it is. That's all. Is that enough?
And Brian, I don't think having this in writing and having this be our schedule means that this has to be the end of it. If at any point the board feels like it needs to hear more, it can schedule further meetings.
We agree.
You all need
Thank you. Okay. That was all.
I think we should also start thinking about some of these amenities, though. I mean, whether we get any or not, I think it's never too late to start thinking if our parks, now that we've focused on 3 specific parks, how they could be better, because this is a great opportunity to be prepared and have some things to maybe ask for, research, get some pricing, so we know. So I think it's not too late to start with that.
Absolutely not. And I think similar to the process that we did internally when it was West Park was every board member sit and think through some ideas, get them all to me. I can, get them all into one form and distribute them back out to everybody.
Well, I also think it's a time for the public, if there's, certain
Absolutely.
things on your wish list. I know we've heard it, community playing fields forever, some kind of track or whatever, there's
Or
now lighting now is the time to send us those requests,
And staff.
whether they're granted or not.
Yeah, I would
Don't
want
worry, we're not
recommendations
gonna be
from staff.
bashful.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, because staff knows
I've already
better than
got my
anybody
list.
what people
There is a
ask
list?
for and don't have. And
Yep.
What did you say?
I said staff knows better than anybody what people are asking for and we don't have, or what,
Yeah,
they say, I wish we had this here, and
We
why
won't be
don't have
silent
it?
in the process.
Right.
Don't worry.
Right.
Are there other questions, comments, concerns for Steve, the village? So at this point, Steve will go back to the village, let them know what we discussed, and then we'll continue to bring any latest pertinent information to us so that we're having the most information at the most up-to-date moment possible as in our thinking process, so that as we're pondering and looking at all this, we have everything that we need to go on to make thoughtful and informed decisions.
Thank you. I do want to thank you and thank Steve for the report and the work done and these meetings set up. So thank you.
Yeah. I think the more minds thinking about this, the better. It can't hurt. And I think the more we discuss it and let everybody know what we're doing, the better as well. So, okay. Any other questions, comments? All right. We will move along to new business.
Consideration, that's me. Give me a second. So this has to do with the Verizon agreement. This is cell towers over. Thank you. So in the board packet was a Verizon site access agreement, which Steve referenced, and I'm going to go ahead and move to approve the Verizon site access agreement as presented.
I'll second.
Any questions? I had one question. In here, it discusses actually environmental testing, which I thought was an interesting. So that's built into this, and I'm assuming, obviously, our lawyers and everybody have looked through this, and
Absolutely.
that's just to make sure that there's no outside oddities that come from any of this, correct?
Correct.
And that's done once it's installed, or is that done prior to it being installed?
This is prior to.
Prior
This
to.
agreement is.
Okay. Any other questions?
It was very interesting to read.
All right. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Pelleton?
Yes.
Commissioner Olvani?
Yes.
Commissioner Shelley?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Agreement is approved.
Thank you. Next up is adjournment to closed
Yeah.
session.
I will move to adjourn to closed session to discuss the minutes of meetings lawfully closed, whether for purpose of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes, and to discuss the appointment, employments, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the district or against legal counsel to determine its validity, in accordance with Section 2C21 and 21 of the Open Meetings Act.
I'll second that.
Thank you. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Pelleton?
Yes.
Commissioner Olvani?
Yes.
Commissioner Shelley?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes. We'll adjourn to closed session.